Hello, and welcome to our Bodhana panel at Onyx PathCon, where we're going to talk about the Bodhana Group and answer your questions about one of our favorite charities that we often support here at Onyx PathCon, and maybe talk a little bit about branch riders, but there's a lot of
What
things
are
that,
the odds?
right. But I mean, we've talked about this before in a couple of other panels. I've forgotten which one. There have been so many this weekend, which has been a lot of fun. But usually we do have a charity component to Onyx PathCon, and that charity is inevitably Bodhana Group. But since Bodhana Group has a Kickstarter right now with branch riders, if you wanted to contribute to Bodhana Group, that is probably the best way right now to support them.
Yep.
But also you can support Bodhana Group directly, and
Plus,
I'm
you
sure
get a
she
whole
won't.
game out of it if you support it
Right?
at
Yeah,
a
you can
higher
get it for
level,
free.
Yeah.
and it's a great
Uh,
game at that.
Oh, yeah.
but also, I've just put in the chat if you wanted to support directly for some reason, there's also a link on how to support that. But perhaps we can start. We've all introduced ourselves in previous panels, so I'm actually going to skip that. But we'll go right to Jack. For people who don't know what the Bodhana Group is, let's kind of start
Yeah.
there. What is it about?
All right. So the Bodhana Group, we are a 501c3 charity nonprofit, and we are all about the utilization of all manner of tabletop games for educational skill building and therapeutic goals. So that not only is role playing, but that is also the use of board games for anything from helping develop confidence, resilience, to using the games to help people work through anxiety, depression. We also do support for people on the autism spectrum, general like social capacities and things like that. So it's very covert therapy that we believe that games inherently contain a beneficial aspect to them. We most of us as gamers, I mean, how many of your friends can you count in your life that you met at a gaming table? That's most of the
Yeah.
social circle that I have. Like, even to this day, there's friends that I've had for over 30 years, and we met at a table, and that's where it started. But that's kind of like they've been kind of the most true blue, if you will. And we know that, not only did those friendships develop and those connections, but, just thinking of the characters that we play over the years and what those characters meant to us developmentally, think of the character you play when you were 12 versus the character you play when you're like in your mid to late 30s. There's a different dynamic to those characters.
There was no
Hopefully.
Dungeons and Dragons when I was 12, Jack.
Oh, geez. Cowboys and Indians?
Which country did you
Hoop and
play in
stick.
Risk?
I always got stuck with Australia. That's
Wow.
right.
Got stuck with. I mean, Australia's the best country to have. What are you talking
That's
about?
the
Truth be told, I utilize these games and I study these games. Like we have a very robust training program. So any therapists, educators, or community workers who want to learn how to do intentional gaming, we have trainings that we offer. We also have peer-reviewed research in the Journal of Social Work with Groups about the efficacy of role-playing for adults with social anxiety. I mean, there's a lot that Bodhana does. The Save Against Fear convention, I know we mentioned yesterday in the branch
coming
riders.
up in November, isn't it?
Yes,
Yep.
November 8th through the 10th here in York, Pennsylvania. It is our 14th annual Save Against Fear convention.
14. Wow.
Yeah, and Rich holds one of two distinctions. Onyx Path, I should say, and Rich hold one of two distinctions, that there are only two companies in the role-playing game industry who have been a supporter of and at every single Save Against Fear in some capacity, and that is Onyx Path and Rich, as well as our good friend Calvin Johns from Anthropos Games. So the only two companies that have supported every year of Save Against Fear in Bodhana.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And actually, it's a good segue. Rich, how did you get involved with this knucklehead and the Bodhana Group?
So it was the first Bodhana sponsored Save Against Fear. I believe it was in the old 6 feet. What is
Yeah,
it?
it was the old 6 feet under games
6 feet under.
Gap no, in New Holland,
Yep.
Pennsylvania. Now they're in Gap.
And Onyx Path is a Pennsylvania company. We're based in Pennsylvania, and it was not that far of a drive. And I thought it's a local con, and I haven't done enough of that. And in the beginning of Onyx, I visited a lot of the local cons that when I would hear of them, even went to a local live action role playing con for a little bit.
Ooh.
So it was just getting to know the folks that were in the immediate vicinity, and so went over to that and checked it out. And Jack was happy that I was there, and said he had all these fans who were like, now too shy to say anything, and so they're around somewhere, but they have books that they like you to sign and stuff like
Oh,
that. And
oh
so
yeah.
Oh,
that was
bless.
very, very cool. But we wound up in a couple hours into the convention and stuff like that. Jack and I just wound up taking a break and hanging out and talking. And that's when he really got into the details of what they were trying to do. And I think it was in the sort of what can we do stage of kind of going
Very
forward.
early. I know that you always go, nah, come on, don't make a fuss. And I've told this story so many times, but that at that point, Bodhana was a consultation and training company. Specifically, we were working towards rehabilitation of people with sexually problematic behaviors. And we thought at that time that, the whole reason for Bodhana and even the name Save Against Fear was originally it was Save Against the Fear to talk about sexual violence and to get help and
Oh,
things like that. That's where the name came from, but it just kind of stuck. But when we were talking about like very innovative forms of therapy that we were trying to approach, Rich was telling me from the old White Wolf days about, just
Mhm.
of people
Well,
saying,
we didn't have any new Onyx Path days at that time.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
it.
yeah.
it was fresh in the start. But it was letters from people who had, playing in the world of darkness settings, they were conquering inner demons on their
Yep.
own. And
Mm.
just all of that sharing that Rich had, it was kind of, I jokingly refer to it as like my, light shining through the stained glass and Blues Brothers, moment where it was like, wait a minute. So these folks
We're
got this
on a mission
benefit.
from God
Yeah, exactly. Like they got this benefit
to
without the
drive the
guidance
car.
of a professional. So what if we quote unquote like, operationalized and weaponized this in a way that we were like, what if you had the guidance of a practitioner who was experienced in role-playing games? And then we started to drift into conversations about how it adjuncts into narrative therapy and expressive arts therapy and psychodrama and drama therapy and play therapy. And that began, the whole genesis of our direction that we fully kind of, turned off that exit on the expressway and we're like, yeah, this is where we're going to set up shop here. And that was, the 4-year journey of just researching, talking about it as a model. We didn't work with clients for about 4 years after conceptualizing. Then we
Mm.
found out there are other people doing what we wanted to do, and that has kind of
Mhm.
just grown out of that wonderful initial conversation that really did bring a lot, including after I embarrassed myself when Rich goes over to the Magic the Gathering place and me. I don't magic. And Rich is like, oh, there's one of mine. There's one of mine. And me being the rude noob in the room was like, oh, you play. And he was like, no, I drew these. And I was like, oh, I didn't, so
It was a trap, Jack. It's just for my ego.
yeah,
Right.
It was all about that.
it's
It's a device, if you will.
yeah. Now I'm like, yeah, I know the guy
The
that
black
created
vice.
Stuffy. How's it going?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also talked that I had played vampire back in college. I guess it was like '92, probably, and then I LARPed in a vampire game in a club called the Bank in Philadelphia. The
Yeah.
Really?
Twilight Tenebris, I
It was
believe.
an old bank.
Yeah.
How have we been friends for several years and I'm just now finding you used to LARP?
Are you at all surprised? Oh, wait. Guess
I'm not
what clan
surprised.
I
I just
was?
didn't
I
know.
wore leather jacket with all kinds of like ripped up
You
clothes.
also played a Barat too? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was.
How did I not know this? I also played a Barat in many of my LARPs I played in.
Yeah.
Jack
So
played a Malkavian who thought he was a Bruja.
I've also played a Malkavian who thought he was a Barat.
this is why we get
He
along
was
as
very bad at his
well.
job.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Oh, so wild. Um, but okay, so it sounds like there was kind of a mixture of like, you had one idea of where you wanted to take Badana, and then you talked with Rich and other people, and that kind of helped shape and form the direction Badana went in. So what is it like today, right? I mean, you gave a kind of a high level view of what Badana does, but like boots on the ground,
hmm.
what is like, yeah, what kinds of things does Badana do? Like, do you do active therapy? Do you train
What's a
people? How
typical
does that
day
work?
for Jack?
Typical
Right.
day.
After watching MASH,
Yeah, after what it's on right now.
Oh,
Um,
damn it, I added to the pop culture counter.
no,
Ah.
I got to goodbye, farewell, and amen last night, so I restarted the series because that's what I do.
She
No,
just can't stop.
yeah,
Have to have
absolutely.
MASH on every day.
It's my tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwich.
I can't think of
That's
two possible episodes that would be less like each other than the finale and the very first episode.
oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
The
Oh,
the tonal shift will give you whiplash.
oh my
yeah,
gosh.
true.
Well, and I do have a theory that I've discussed with Ian on many, many occasions because he's a super MASH head that MASH, I don't believe, is actually about Hawkeye's journey. I really, really believe that the show is more about Margaret Houlihan's journey because she has the
Interesting.
most character change. But my thesis will be coming out in a number of years. Um, no, there's a lot that we do. I mean, on the very basic level, we do provide direct services to individuals. We work predominantly with children and teens, but we also do have adult groups that we run. We run groups in person here in York, as well as we run online facilitation groups, and we have kids from across the country who
Mm,
are in
okay.
those groups. So not only do we run private pay groups, we also, I mean, if you're out there and or listening to this broadcast and you're like, hey, we're an organization that would love a program like this, but we don't have staff that can run these groups. That's okay. Another service that we do is we do also run contracted services where we'll run groups for you. Typically, again, virtually is mostly how we do that. So if you have a program that wants to engage in this, we can also train you how to start your own game-based program, and that's board or RPG, like I said. Um, I mean, if some other things that are a little bit new, we always loved going to local events. Things like disability resource fairs, parents resource
Mm.
fairs, mental health advocacy. We go to a lot of professional conferences, which honestly, I mean, back because hashtag nonprofit life, I'm always asking for money because that's what that fuels a nonprofit. Like people are like, I'll spread the word. That's great. But, we nonprofits need money for gas to pay staff to, get materials so we can constantly stay abreast of what's in the tabletop industry. We have an active library of about 3,000 titles that we take these to these disability fairs so
We
we
have a
can
huge game
demonstrate.
library.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
massive.
if you go to Save, the library that's there is literally a portion of what we have. And so we like taking these games out because most people say, oh, you do tabletop like board game therapy. Oh, like Monopoly or Life or Feelings Uno. And they're like, no, we play board games kids want to play, first of all. um,
Right.
like we'll play a co-op board game like Marvel Legendary or Battle for Hogwarts, Harry Potter deck builder, because that's a co-op game. So it involves kids socializing with each other and partnering with each other for strategy. Again, covert. We're using the game's mechanics and flow as a way for people to naturally or organically work on skills, but we never forget that fundamentals start with fun. So that's a big part. And we also will go to like local schools, local other nonprofits in the area. We run free programs for them to kind of show what it is that we can do. And recently, we have started what we are calling our Play It Forward initiative, where we realize that even though it's very impressive to have a library of 3,000 games, we don't need all those games. So so what we
I
started
mean,
to
you
do,
personally do, but
I can never, I need all the games. But we've started going through the collection, and we've called the collection to games that would be very beneficial for kids and teens. And we have a list currently of about 35 local nonprofits. And we just gather up a bunch of board games that will be appropriate for their setting, for their age ranges, what have you. And we're just giving the gift of gaming. We have already donated well over 300 titles to our local library system. That's going to be even more so because we're going to do board game events at 9 of the 13 York branches, literally because I'm a glutton for punishment and apparently a masochist for therapy, that we're doing it literally the day after we get back from Origins.
Oh,
That
wow.
we're going and we're doing 9 events that week at the local libraries, and each library is getting an additional donation just for their branch. And we've donated to like community centers in a couple of the different neighborhoods around York, anything from AARP to the ARC, which, is folks with disability. And that's been our latest initiative. We've had a lot of great help from the industry who donated tons of games. I think at last time when we went to PAX Unplugged, we received over $10,000 in product donation, all
Wow.
express intent of we are playing it forward. We are giving these games, whether it's Restoration, Ravensburg, or what have you, Catalyst Game Labs, like all these companies just threw a ton of games and puzzles and whatever at us. And we're like, we got enough prize support for Save Against here for years. So
Right.
we're just giving this to local agencies. And we do say, hey, if you'd like training, we offer that. And we offer trainings at reduced rates for nonprofit because we get it. But that's been a huge initiative as part of what we call our Grow Local plan, which is doing a lot more local engagement. Like, yeah, it's great to be known nationally or internationally or whatever, but we're really about impacting the community and showing people what games can do, which is also kind of an outcrop of Save Against Fear. So our biggest plan that we're hoping to get funding for is we're going to call it the Bodhana Bus. And it's basically a bookmobile style vehicle where we are going to take board games around to agencies that, let's try something new. Even if you're an agency we've donated to and giving games to, we're going to bring the bus, sign out a couple of games for 2 or 3 weeks. We'll come back and pick them up, give you a new fresh crop of games. So this way, folks, because, they can get a taste of what this is and really see that beneficial power that gaming has. That's really been a lot of what our initiative is, in addition to running the con, running the business, getting more training, and also making an awesome role-playing game. So we're a little busy, I guess is a good way to say it. But yeah, any donation, and I know the Great Nonprofits link is on there. So if you're like, what really are you guys about? Great Nonprofits is awesome because it also contains a wealth of reviews that we have worked with people who have received our trainings, gone to our events, clients. So you can see firsthand, we've been a top-rated nonprofit on that site for 3 years running now. So
Wow.
Yeah, you can go there and you can even make a donation, like say you want to donate, on a regular basis. There are options there where you can do a large donation at once, or you can do a donation that every month you're donating to us. And like I said, every little bit helps, especially when we go to like big conventions like Origins. We're going to be there next week, play testing and showcasing branch riders and getting more branch riders into the Nexus, as it were. We're going to be at booth 531, and I will probably repeat that 8 times before we're done today. But yeah,
what's the number on that booth, Jack? I didn't catch
531, 531.
5, 3, 1.
It's like counting down, but you're skipping numbers.
Yes.
It's all odd. 5, 3, 1.
It's a prime countdown.
And if anything's appropriate for Jack and Bodhana, odd numbers, certainly.
That's true. That's true.
I'm odd because I just can't even. No. Did the young kids still say that? I don't know. It's
Kids
Probably
today with
not.
their prime numerals. What?
with their hula hoops and fax machines.
And they're numbers that can't be divided evenly by two. Oh, weird.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so
uh,
strange.
so obviously, Rich, Onyx Path is a strong and long relationship with the Bodhana Group. Um, and we touched on some aspects of that, but what is right now the relationship with Onyx and Bodhana?
It's estranged. It's both strange and estranged. We really we're
We don't
tired of
talk
each other.
much.
It's been too many years. Now, right now, obviously our biggest direct connection is that we're working on the branch riders, and we're going to be publishing that
Mm,
for Badana. We have been doing that. I mean, you've been working on the text with Jack and the
mhm.
gang for about a year now. Been hiring artists and hiring or getting designs together, getting logos designed and all that stuff that you now see on the Branch Riders Kickstarter site. All that's been happening in the last also direct year, but previous to that, when Jack first started talking about doing their own game and doing what would that entail? What would that be like? It's going through multiple iterations of how much of the therapeutic aspect of it is overt, which the answer is almost not at all now,
Yeah.
because it's designed by therapists who know what they're doing in terms of how do you create a situation where people will be having a lot of fun, but in a what is it, with intent, I think is the way you
Yes.
guys put it,
Oh,
right?
right. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Therapeutic with
Intentional
intent.
gaming. Yep.
Um, so it is absolutely not overt, and it is also not designed to teach anyone therapy or to try give you something where you can, like, as someone who's not trained, try to therapeuticize the people at your table. That's not what it's about either, but it has been changing and evolving, and I think getting stronger each and every iteration to eventually where we went, this is it, this is a goodie. um, let's go. And that was the point that Jack said, okay, would you guys read through this manuscript for us, tell us what you'd like, please be brutal with it, be destructive. I want to see if you still use red marker all over it. I want a bloody manuscript when it's done.
Cut it
and
open,
and then
Rich.
he and
Cut
then
it
he like
open.
and then he just put it up and he cringed. He went,
Yeah. Put it in me.
Not the face. Not the face.
and in fact, we really didn't have to do that. We made some change. We made some suggested changes on structure. We made some specific changes on things that we thought worked or didn't work or stuff like that. But by and large, Jack and
Not a lot.
Doug and no,
And well,
begins with a B.
and
Bonnie.
Bonnie, thank you.
Mhm.
Were and the rest of the team they just did a fantastic job. Um, it's a very nice, clean and easy system. There's a lot of there's a lot of visual aids that actually make it just in the flow of the story and the play that you're having. So I think they did a great job. We didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot to make it viable as a role playing game. That was already there. We just went into it and made it clean, slightly easier to read. But
yeah,
your team pretty much was honing away at that stuff
well,
anyway.
the
We
trick
just
was
gave you more voices.
yeah, the trick was all about because I remember initially, and again, there are many different things that I mean, I think you're going to actually you read about them for those of you who've seen this week's Monday meeting minute. A little bit of the story of like, Eddie and I had that what I consider that very fateful Eddie Fate. Hey, what did see what I did there? Conversation at PAX Unplugged, where
Mhm.
it was, and again I paraphrase because but you're like, you need a direction here. Like you have a lot of great ideas, but there's no skeleton to hang a game onto. Like there's no
Right.
framework for it. So that we went back to the drawing board. It was like, okay, guys, like every other role playing game designer that I've met in my life who is like, I got to create these fancy words for stats, or I got to create these, you know what I mean? Like everyone's like, no, I don't mean dexterity. I mean fluidity. And it's like, no, it's dexterity. Come on, stop reinventing things. We were there initially because we wanted the therapy to be very heavy. And it became very clear through very good feedback that that ain't going to work for multiple reasons. One, it wouldn't come off as a good therapeutic aid if it was therapy first, game second, because we encountered that for
Right.
so many years. And we were like, no, we don't want to go down that road. And then at the end, we were like, well, it's also, we want it to appeal to more people. We want, because we were excited about these worlds. And when they started to fully flesh out and get developed, it became so intense. We were like, we want everyone to enjoy this.
Right.
If you're a therapist, right? It's like that old spaghetti sauce commercial, like, Charlie, it's in there. You know what I mean? Like, the therapy is under the hood. If you're a therapist, I think we always use the
You
phrase,
recognize it.
see what you're doing here. All right, I got
Yep.
you. But if
Yep.
but if you're not, like, I think the only therapeutic mention is once or twice in the forward, then in the realm guide, there's like a couple paragraphs saying, yeah, here's the therapeutic skill thing. Otherwise, we got a facilitator's guide.
Right, and that's a
Full
separate book. One of the backer tier levels, you can include that, or you can do it as an add-on, and
Yep.
it is just so really the therapeutic aspect of it is now basically optional for those for whom that would be of value.
Yeah, and it does, like Doug said in the panel yesterday, it also does include some very good GM advice, because that's
Mhm.
what therapeutic role playing as a game master is about. It's about tweaking the dials
Right.
certain elements, whether you want to evoke more emotional content, or just provide a scene that's very visceral and very relevant to what a client's going through, or if you just want them to demonstrate a skill you're working on through the vestige of their character as like an avatar. That's what it is. We actually use the joke in training. I show a slide that has a scene in the danger room in the X-Men. So it's like Wolverine, Gambit, and some dude with a sword that I can never remember who they are. But Professor X is kind of like creeping in the window over on the left-hand side. And I'm like, this is therapeutic role play. And at first people are like, what are you talking about? It's
I'm
like,
like, what are you talking about?
right. It's like, this is the danger room. You can create any scenario you want with
Mhm.
whatever meaning or intent, and you can dial up the emotionality so that way it can really pack that punch if you want, or it can go very light and intro, like if you're working with younger players, or if you're working with trauma or abuse, that you don't want to be overt with a lot of that. So that worked its way into the design of just the game, where you have so many dials. And again, please refer back to the Branch Riders panel yesterday. We talked a lot about the setting, because I think at first when I think, so we have 8 different settings that are going to be in one game, and both of you are like, uh-huh, sure,
How's
yeah,
that going to work?
yeah, that's great. And now we're like, yeah, there are 8 diverse, distinct settings. So it really does, Branch Riders really does
Yeah,
evoke.
and they're fun settings. They're mashups generally of genres,
Yep.
which so things you wouldn't have necessarily expected to come together. And again, and each one of the branches also has a specific thing that uh, you can build with. Like it's designed specifically about the Wild West setting is mashed up with um, just an art pastiche
Yeah,
of different terms, and you're there in the Wild West, but as I always said, it's one of the funniest built-in puns to appeal to my sense of humor, at least, is that when you are the fastest draw in that Wild West, you're literally whipping out a pen and drawing something
Yep.
that's better than what the other guy is drawing, and that's how you win that duel. Um, and
Love it.
that's
life at high noon.
yeah, team building and that sort of stuff. And if you're a DM, you're used to the idea that you got a whole group, and like 4 of the people in the group, they just want to fight. They want fighting. I want to have a battle. Give me the tactical moment. And then you got one other person who wants to solve puzzles. or you've got or they want to really engage on the backstory, or they're really into the history of the area. They don't really care about fighting the monster. They want to know
Yep.
why is the design of this dungeon Mesoamerican looking. I mean, like, whoa. How do you balance that as a DM, and how do you deal with making sure everybody has their moment of having fun? It is a juggling act. It's a balancing act. And I think that is one of the things that, as Jack was saying, when you're running a game, when you're facilitating people's enjoyment, in this instance, you're actually dealing with them as for their individual needs. So we're approaching that moment of, oh yeah, I'm starting to care about this in a way that isn't just, am I running a game? I'm running a series of scenarios at the same time.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things the facilitator's guide would help anybody get a better handle on.
Oh yeah, just because I mean it does give you a little bit more idea of like here's some of the therapeutic use of like our approaches system, which again I know we're not necessarily the first to do certain things like a lot of systems GMs don't roll dice, right? But approaches truthfully takes it to what's your motivation for this scene, like what are you going for, right? So when we talk about like whether it's being a forceful approach, a creative approach, an observant approach, etc., just that idea alone in how it meets many players and the way that they play at the table. And like there are some players who they don't even use their gift at all, they just want to explore how many combinations they can do between their approaches and their skills.
Mm-hmm.
Play
Right.
your
Yep.
way, you know what I mean? And like yesterday, if you have a chance, folks, you're watching us now, please go back and watch yesterday's play test because it's going to sound silly, but the branch riders are there to help an onslaught of scribbles. And
Hmm.
since Rich mentioned the borderland, the Western themed world, so a scribble is an unfinished drawing. And I can't express, because artists know, how many pieces of ripped up, crumpled up paper do you have in your bin, in your wastebasket, right? Now imagine if those were like, why didn't you finish me? Like, what was wrong with me? Now we're kind of leaning a little into like horror, where like
Mm-hmm.
either play it for horror, you could play it for giggles, like we did yesterday, where it's like all these cartoony, balloony animals, and they're like finishing them off with paint strokes and driving this like ridiculous battle. I'm like, these are all adults playing this game, but this is the exact same kind of fun I see in a 10 to 14-year-old group. And that's another thing that even not by design really came out of the other end of this creative process when making branch riders is people let go when they play this, because yeah, there are cartoon physics kind of scenarios if that's how you want to play it. So it literally is one size fits all. If you're not into fantasy, you're into sci-fi, we got two realms for you, maybe three. That we got something for everyone, whether it's the context of the adventure or the setting, which also is beneficial therapeutically. I got tons of kids that can't grok D&D because it's fantasy, and to get into that mindset is difficult for some kids. That's why Kids
Mm-hmm.
on Bikes was more successful for them, because I'm just playing a regular kid, cool. Now they can craft whatever kind of character that they would want, and it's amazing. We're so proud of what we've come up with, and the partnership with Onyx again talked about a bunch in the meeting minute notes from this week, but
And there'll
it
be more this week coming up because I had to cut your stuff in half.
I'm
wait, I
shocked.
I can fill space and time like Jack.
Like nobody else, buddy.
Nobody else.
Oh,
Um, but it is interesting you mentioned the not grokking D&D because that actually tracks a little bit with my experience. Because when I was growing up, I grew up in let's say economically disadvantaged area, and this was like the early '80s, so D&D was coming on the big swing. And so I had the Red Box, but I also had the Marvel Superheroes game that TSR made at the time. And
woohoo.
so pitching the idea to friends of mine, and they're like, "That I don't know anything about that fantasy stuff, but I do know comic books," and so that's how I got a lot of really Marvel Superhero was actually my first game that I played, and ran. Because that was all my friends kind of really understood. So that actually does track with me, and it's nice that you can have a game where I mean, we say eight, but really there's also subgenres kind of folded into some of those. There's just so many options. There's probably going to be a branch that you could find that someone will connect with and be able to play with.
Well, in fact, as Doug was saying in the panel about branch riders specifically, is that what's presented in branch riders is one small section of an entire world. They can't show you the entire world for 8 of them all in one book. It would be a 2,000-page book, but that is the area they've chosen that demonstrates the themes of the entire world. But you could have that a whole nother city over there for the heights, which is the superhero thing. You could have a whole nother city over there, which is far more 1963 Marvel starts up kind of feeling place.
Right.
You could have another one way over there that's Spawn City, if you want to go into
McFarland Land.
dudes with wild crinkly capes everywhere, but
Liefeld
yeah,
land, all pouches.
No feet.
No feet.
there's nothing that says that you can't move into the other genres within any of these worlds, because they're talking about that this is an actual culture. You're just getting a piece of it.
Yeah, and even the worlds were designed. I mean, speaking of the comic book aesthetic, that was actually one of the driving points where we're like, okay, we're doing a starter setting, but that's just one way to look at that realm. Like looking at the heights, the superhero realm, we make the kind of conceit that everyone in this, like, I thought it would be funny. And this is before I even heard of My Hero Academia or any of this other stuff, because people were like, man, you took from this. I was like, hey, we've been writing for quite a while now. But the idea of everybody has a superpower. Now, you may not have laser beams or magma producing, hands or whatever. Maybe, and I love this joke that I tell all the time, maybe your superpower is you can use a straight edge, like a flathead screwdriver, and it never slips off the screw. Like that's your superpower.
Oh man,
right?
that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, if you build furniture or you're a carpenter, you're set. But maybe in one of the cities, it would be more interesting to say only the privileged have superpowers, or maybe only certain genetic lines have superpowers, which again, how many different versions of these stories do we see in comic books, graphic novels, what ifs, whatever? The idea in our mind was every starter setting in the height, whether it's Capadonia, which is our starter setting, or whether it's, Liefeld land or whatever you make, like those cities are connected. And in the comics, I go from Metropolis to Star City. I don't care about most of the podunk stuff in the middle, right? So those are connected, but the realms themselves are separated from each other. So you can still have, like, it's not just the whole adventure has to take place in this one place. No, you can have adventures that stretch across multiple cities as the blight, works their machinations. And we've already seen in our play tests, whether it's recreational or therapeutic, because we've play tested both for over 3 years, that the amount of creativity that comes out of this setting idea that we came up with blows me out of the water. Like people are coming up with twists and derivations of this, and I'm just like, oh my god, like that's brilliant. Part of me is, could you write for me? Like in my kind of like, this is a great story. Hey kid, you want to be in the RPG business?
Don't do that to anyone, Joe.
No,
We pay pennies an hour.
Let them live long and happy lives.
Right. So on myself, I don't wish this. But no, so obviously we're very excited about that, because we also think that this is going to help get the word more out there to people. Because that's kind of a sideline, is that, yes, this is becoming more the zeitgeist where people are talking about, therapeutic gaming. You see more groups propping up at local libraries, after school programs, which we also support. And that's wonderful. but I also like the idea of maybe trying in our own little way to turn the tide against like that satanic panic thing of, you know, these games being evil or a waste of time or whatever. I like that there's an aspect of this that, you know, we take very seriously at Bodhana. We don't ever talk about this like, look at how cool I am, man. I get to run D&D as my job. Like, no, I run therapy. I just
Right.
happen to use a role-playing game to do that. And it's very, very mindful and pointed work. Like, this is not just woohoo, funsies, whatever. It is fun, but
Right.
it's work, and it's serious work. And we really hope and always talk about how to take it seriously since the
And
beginning.
that actually leads to my next question is, I mean, obviously, Brent Riders is built from the ground up to facilitate therapeutic uses, but before that, you've been using other tabletop games for this, and so to keep it in-house, and also because I love you telling me stories. Now, how would you use a game like, say, Pugmire to for therapeutic purpose? How would you convert that? What needs to change? How does that need to be adjusted at all?
Perfect example, Eddie. I'll tell my favorite story of where a Pugmire campaign started
I love the story.
and where it ended as a result of the players. So I knew initially the goal that we were working on was communication, collaboration, teamwork, and you know, kids just dealing with that feeling of being under pressure. So I was like, okay, so I could be a little light here because those goals aren't really like, I'm not working on trauma, I'm not working on abuse. So let me do something a little fun. So
Hmm.
I postulated, what if there was a relic? And this relic was found in some of the ruins of the time of man. And this relic proved that there should be no infighting between the realms of Pugmire and the monarchies of Mao and you know, all of the squeaks in the deep noise. We should all get along because this relic proves that dog, cat, and mouse coexisted at one time.
Hmm.
And truth be told, it was just a campaign where I was going to rickroll a bunch of kids with an animation cell of Spike, Tom, and Jerry lemonade together. You could
Mm-hmm.
find this still online, right? And that was my whole thing. And at the end, I was going to give them each a framed copy of this picture. Like, it was going to be a whole thing, right? So I started running the adventure, and this is literally once pandemic hit, and these kids are feeling very estranged, and
Hmm.
they had no connection with other people. So I did this, and I dropped in a town where, because I had Pirates of Pugmire and all this, I was like, yeah, I'm putting birds in there and lizards. Everybody's in this town. And one of the kids said, why does the relic only have dogs, cats, and mice? Don't rats matter? Don't
Oof.
birds and lizards, right? And I was like, and again, as a therapeutic GM, a lot of people are like, oh, so you set a story up and you railroad kids along the story. No,
Oh, okay.
I sat in that moment and I said, I have to be reflective, because one of the aspects of things like narrative therapy, drama therapy, play therapy is what the client is giving you to the experience is highly important, because they're
Okay.
telling you what they want this to be.
It's yes and.
Well, absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
And how does that make you feel? Right. It's kind of a
Okay.
sad.
Yeah, yeah,
So
okay.
I was like, okay, what's going on right now in the context of their world? And at that time, we were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. We were talking about, you know,
Oh,
a
wow.
rising tide against, you know, transgender and anti-LGBTQIA. And I was like, these kids want to represent tribes. And I even analyzed it, and I won't go into detail because of HIPAA, but the way that they in the group were reflected and what groups they were from and what tribes they were from, I was like, they want to speak out because their voices aren't being heard right now because of pandemic and all of this unrest going on in the world. So I completely just screw the rest of the adventure I had planned. Like, that'll still be a good fun way to end it.
Right.
But what I
Right.
do is I say, okay, so birds, feathers, different skin. So we are connecting to, you know, the black identity of one of the players that he was trying to work towards, and then another person was going through some gender identity. So I said, well, what if we talk about lizards? Because, I used Naga because it's like iguanas, but it's a different body shape. So the body doesn't feel like the rest of the group. And then
Okay.
he was working on confidence and expression. So he then became representative for the rats, kind of trying to speak up for them. And these kids, like we had 4 sessions in a row at one point where there was not a single die roll because these kids were speaking for that group and that population. So I turned the adventure to be what therapeutically they were looking for and they were asking for. And it turned into this whole big thing where we created like these Olympic games that was going to be the way that we were going to bring all of the different animal tribes together. And
Mm-hmm.
it turned into
Nice.
this amazing thing where I was like, all right, what if I set up like a gymnast type of thing for some of the animals, but it was on a big gigantic cat tree, right? So they did this whole big Olympic stand, and it was all like running around the rings and tapping the ball, and they loved it.
Knock
And
the glass off the table. Knock the glass off the table.
Chase the red dot. Chase the red dot.
yeah, it was just this amazing thing where but on a similar level, we even, like I said, we started with something basic. And the idea and what attracted us to Pugmire was the familiarity of the setting, that it was in our world, but in the future. The Code of Man was probably one of my biggest because on the surface, it's a great way, compelling gameplay, interaction between players and characters, but it also has implication for moral discussions.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean when we say only bite those that endanger you, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean when a dog believes truthfully, fetch what has been left behind? Like, what is that really like? How far are you willing to go?
Right.
And what do you fetch? What do you leave? Do we fetch everything or do we leave things behind? So I even had the players pick what aspect of the Code of Man that their dog or cat, because for the cats it was the principles obviously, but
Right.
what did they most strongly believe and adhere to? And I kind of use that in a way, like if you've ever played like a fate system and you have like aspects to your character, right? And I would use that to kind of lean on. Because like we had one character where her whole story as a cat was that she was experimented on by the cult of Laboteur, and she was given magical ability because of their experimentation, but she had like this weird Stockholm syndrome with her experimenter, and like this is all from the kid.
Wow.
But it was all about this person dealing with the anger that they had over an absent parent.
Wow.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So again, what a client brings to their character, what they bring to the story, what they bring interacting with the story, you gotta go where that takes you in this. And that can be difficult, especially if you're kind of coming up with stuff as you go and you got to, like, again, swerve on a dime or whatnot. But there's so much nuance and creativity and depth and these are kids that were in like a 10 to 14-year-old group. So that's just an idea of like, the setting drew them in. They were all animal lovers. So I was like, all right, this is also a system I know. A lot of them had never role played, so I didn't want to overcomplicate through D&D. So that's when I thought mechanically, aesthetically, just design everything. Pugmire was perfect, and that was our first private A group that we ran, was using Pugmire.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that interests me about that, first of all, thank you for telling that. I knew the beginning and the end were very different. I didn't know about the middle part. That was actually really cool. But it does sound like you can't just grab any game and do this, right? You couldn't use like the Warhammer 40K, or whatever. That you have to be. It sounds like you have to really look at the book and see. Is it just a general, this game be good for therapy, or is it down to like this group would gravitate with this game? Is it that specific?
That is actually how specific it gets. Because again, there is a group that I am waiting, like I want to run an anger management group using the Doctor Who role-playing game.
Oh, okay.
Because in the Doctor Who role-playing game, especially the new cubicle partnership with the D&D Doctors and Daleks,
Right.
talkers go first,
Hmm.
fighters go last.
Right.
I want this because the system itself is mechanically designed in keeping with a goal that we would have of anger isn't always your first thing. Like, yeah, I understand that you're angry. Wait, no, you're not. Think if you want to go first, think of something different.
Where does crying fit into that system?
I think it's talking. I think Frying falls under talking.
Yeah, it's talkers, doers, then fighters.
So Crier's got to fit somewhere in there, I think,
Uh,
because that's a
I
big
would,
part of both Shudy's new Doctor and David Tennant.
Right.
yeah. Oh well, shouting and crying. That is the new face of
Okay,
the
that maybe just
yeah.
exclamations of emotion belong in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it is about looking at a system mechanically, aesthetically, also looking at just what genre the players prefer. Like we have an array of, I would say probably about 14 different games that we can use. And we have used the phase rip system from Marvel. We've used TSR D&D. We've used Shadowrun. We've used Kids on Bikes, Kids on Brooms, Pugmire with Monarchies, etc.
Mhm.
We've also been using, or we're starting a lot of our groups because of how far we've come with branch riders. We're starting a lot of our regular groups using our own in-house system as one of our systems of preference. And it really is, there are a lot of games out there that will do a lot of things. And I really encourage therapeutic GMs, don't just go with D&D because it's the system everyone knows. It does. I have no ill will towards WotC or any of that, but it really bothers me that there's so many great systems out there that don't get the attention and the focus that they deserve for really innovating the industry in the field. And I'm not just talking about branch riders here, but
Right.
because that's like the only game in town. No, there's tons of games in this town. It's just we have to extend ourselves a little. And I think that even when folks talk about, how long a combat round could take in D&D or, other systems that are very mechanically heavy, I need sleek and quick. Most therapist sessions last an hour. You're barely
Yeah.
getting to a combat scenario in a 6-person group in an hour. Like,
Right.
and that's wasted time therapeutically, where if you have them, again, this is what led to branch riders being a very narratively driven system. Not only is that compelling gameplay for any other table in the US or in the world, but it's also sleeker, quicker, and easier for a therapist or a teacher who is on limited time. Plus, like we said in the panel yesterday, I mean, it's simple and sleek. Kids love telling stories, and a kid could run branch riders. They're
Oh
very
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, they're kids can run D&D, and Branch Riders is not like D&D.
Yeah.
And it's I certainly think it's an actually easier system overall. And again, like I say, it's very visually oriented, so you have cues around the table that will help you know what to do next, which is always one of the big problems with especially beginning people role playing, is what can I do if I can do almost anything?
Yeah,
Right.
it's, and I think that ours is definitely, there's an advantage in the accessibility, because like people are like, oh my God, there's this new system. I was like, trust me, you'll have this game down in 5 minutes, guaranteed. You make a character in like 15 minutes, 5 minutes, you will learn how to play, and you will already dive in, because we've seen it at cons when we
Yep.
play tested. I did notice there's an interesting question in the chat. I didn't want to
I was
break
about to ask
slide.
you,
Yeah.
this, but for people who watch this video in the future, Awkward GM in the chat did ask, after branch riders, where's the Bodhana Group looking for to go in the future?
Which is an awesome question. One, we have kind of already, as a team, looked at the idea of, the success of the Branch Riders Kickstarter campaign, as well as the success of it as a book and as a line. We've already contemplated like some additional materials, like, additional starter locations for people. So you'll have more cities or adventures, more story prompts, even looking at different ways that we can explain or take the mechanics to like, okay, you want to use our system to do an investigation. How can we guide? So we're looking at kind of an ancillary way of improving upon, not changing, because we always want branch writers to have that simple, basic 4 or higher success, yes and through yes, no, or no and system. But the idea of there's always a question like, how does this game do a car chase? Or how does this system do
How
grappling?
do you do that?
Right. So we have ideas that we did not want to throw into the final book because these kind of came late into the process. And again, they don't change the basic gameplay, but they will enhance and answer questions. So that's one project, or I should say two, that we're looking. We're also excited about the possibility of user-generated content. I know that there's a lot that is done in that way through the Onyx Path world, because I want to see what settings people come up with. I want to see your, I want to see your branches. I want to know what fruit is budding on the vine in terms
of.
Oh,
you hit that metaphor hard now.
Jack. Yeah. Jack mixed metaphor Birkenstock. Jack extended metaphor Birkenstock. But I think also we also have the idea in mind for a branch writers board game, where our idea is we want each round to be represented by an aspect of the game that represents a certain skill, and that they can be played. Because again, we never do anything easy, right? But the idea is, well, I can play 2 of the realms that maybe one is critical thinking and the other is resilience. All right, so now you're putting together the critical thinking component and the resilience component. That's a different game. That is now a combination of 2 mini games. So it's almost kind of like the game that makes a game out of expansions. But
my designer brain immediately kicked in, but we have 4 minutes left, so I will talk to you about my thoughts afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, besides the thought that, oh my God, Jack, why do you do this to yourself?
Well, I mean, yes, but that's just a kind of a given at this point.
Yeah, that's a given. But that's one of the ideas. I mean, at least in terms of game development line, I mean, as far as Bodhana, like I said, we want to get gaming out to more people. We want to increase the amount of professionals that we're training. We want to just
more positive alliances with other similar groups. I mean, this is all helping everybody. It's not a competition.
Yeah, I mean, with companies that like, we don't just talk about what we do, like we talk about all gaming that is helpful, beneficial. That's one of my favorite things to do at Origins is, people are probably like, oh, so you go to Origins just to ask for stuff. No, we bring Save Against Fear t-shirts and dice bags, and we specifically go to every manufacturer that even if you donated 1 game or 1 stuffed plushie to our prize support table, you get our thanks in the phrase of, here's the con you helped build, here's a t-shirt from the event, and a dice bag with a signature funny rubber ducky in it. Thank you, because you're helping to make everything better by what you do, how you support what we do. And it's just this very cyclical, beneficial, mutual relationship that we just want to keep growing. And that includes doing more research and just running more groups in our area and online. So a lot of good plans.
That's a great way to wrap up. We're about out of time. I do want to note that we've ended this. The pop culture counter is at 10.5. Because I did not know if the Doctor Who references counted, because we're talking about Doctor Who role-playing game, and so I gave it a half point.
So no, it's a full point, because I wasn't referring to the role-playing game, except in how do they take from the actual Doctor Who.
Okay, fair enough. Then it is 11.
He references 11 and Tennant. So technically, that count as 2 points instead of 1.
Same character. They're technically same character.
You're right. It's all.
I love how you're rules lawyering the joke that I made. Because that's Jack.
Oh, fantastic.
So thank you so much, both of you, for hanging out and talking about this. So if people want to find out more about the Bodhana Group, Jack, where would they find you?
You can find us on www.thebodhanagroup.org. You can find us on Facebook, the Bodhana Group. You can also find us at the Bodhana Group on Twitter X and Instagram. And please check out, consider backing and spreading the word about the Branch Writers Kickstarter, which goes until July 11th. special level, because I love this aspect, is if you back at the $45 level, not only do you get this wonderful game for your own table, but you will grant the gift of a copy of Branch Riders to another nonprofit that works with children or teens. So I think that's all the news that's fit to print.
Eddie, I'd
Yep,
like to give you two additional points to our thing, so we get up to full 13 on our 13th year of doing business. All along, I've been drinking out of this mug, which has Dr. Forrester on it from MST3K, and Jack has the famous painting of Manos Hand of Fate behind him.
It is not Manos.
So that is two more. No,
it is a Frank Frazetta of Frank Zappa.
Right.
Because you'll notice the poodle bites, poodle chews, painted by Jackie Neiman Jones, who played Debbie in Manos the Hands of Fate and is the daughter of the master, Tom Jones.
Now we've overshot 14.
Well, no. It's all still coming down.
It's all still Manos. The Hands of Fate.
Yeah. I didn't feel the need to get into the entire thing about it because it's a complex thing that Jack's pulled together for that picture.
But with that, thank you all so much. Please go support the Bodhana Group if you think it's a cause that's worth supporting. They would appreciate any help you have. But definitely, we love them. And the best way we think to support them right now is to back to Kickstarter. So with that, we'll go ahead and close it down, and see you in 30 minutes for the Realms Pugmire panel. So talk to you later,
folks.
I'll be there.
Bye.